In this lesson, we're going to learn how to create fire directly in After Effects using some procedural tools and noise. We're going to build all of the elements that you see here, from the fire to the smoke to the embers. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a new composition. We'll go ahead and name this base underscore fire. It's 1920 by 1080. We're going to set our loop at about 200 frames. So it's going to be a little less than 10 seconds. We're running this at 30 frames a second. So once you've created this, we're going to make a new solid. So let's go layer, new, solid. We'll just name this noise, and we'll hit enter. This will be the same as the comp size. You'll see it's just a blank black noise or solid. So we'll go up here to effect. We're going to go down here to noise and grain. We'll go to fractal noise. You'll see it'll just bring up your typical grayscale noise. We're going to change some of these settings to make this look the way that we want. First, let's change this to dynamic progressive. We'll change this, leave this at soft linear. We're going to open up our contrast window. We're going to turn this contrast up to about 150. Okay, you'll see it'll amplify the darks and the lights. The next thing we want to do is we want to go down here into transform. We're going to open up that rollout. We're going to change the scale. We're going to do this a non-uniform scale. So we want our fire to be a little bit taller than it is wide. So we'll uncheck uniform scaling. You'll see it'll reveal two, scale width and scale height. We'll change the scale width to 150 and we'll change the scale height to 180. This is going to make it a little bit larger and a little bit taller. The next thing we want to do is we want to change our offset turbulence. I'm just going to always set at the very first frame, I'm going to set the turbulence to 0 and 0. That's going to help me with my offset numbers. The next thing I want to do is I want to open up my evolution or click my evolution, and I want to set a key for evolution. Now evolution, if you just scrub through it, you can see it changes the light and the dark. It actually moves the noise and it makes it undulate, which is what we want. So we'll set it at 0 all the way across at our first frame. And then we're going to go all the way to frame 200 and we're going to set the evolution to 6 full rotations. You'll see what'll happen now is that it's going to be moving fairly fast. That's what we need to get started. So this is going to be our base layer. The next thing we're going to want to do is add some animation to our noise. This is going to give our fire that rising effect that you see as it undulates. So we'll go up here to our offset turbulence and we're just going to key this. Again, we're at our 0 frame. We'll key offset turbulence at 0 and 0. We're going to go all the way to frame 200. And we're going to set the offset turbulence in the X to be 500. And what it's going to do is it's basically going to move it sideways just a little bit. And then we're going to set the offset in Y to negative 1500. And what that's going to do is it's just going to move it up. So you can see now we have sort of a diagonal movement in our noise, and this is exactly what we want for our fire. So now that we've created our base noise and given it some animation, let's go ahead and create a new composition. We're just going to call this straight up fire. We'll leave this at 1920 by 1080, 30 frames a second, 200 frames. Go ahead and open that up. We're going to take our base fire, we're going to drag this directly down into our composition. So we're going to go ahead and get the base noise here, but it's going to be its own nested pre-comp. The next thing we want to do is we want to make a shape layer. We want this to be a little bit larger than the frame, but we want to first deselect our base fire so we don't create a mask. We're going to start outside of the frame. We'll start up in the top left-hand corner. We're just going to drag it down. You can see my color is set at black. And I'm just going to make it so that I reveal about the bottom third or quarter of the frame. Okay, we've created that. That's going to be our obscure mask, and this is what's going to limit our fire to the bottom. So we want to add 2 effects to this. So let's go ahead here in effects. We're going to first add a blur. So we'll go here to blur and sharpen, and we'll add a Gaussian blur. Okay, we're going to open up blurriness. You see by default it says at 25. We want to make sure that we turn off a couple of things. So we are going to turn off repeat edge pixels, and then we're going to go ahead and set the blur to about 115. You can see it gives kind of a soft edge there. The next thing we want to add is a displacement map. A displacement map is actually going to deform this layer based on the lights and the darks of another layer. In this case, it's going to be the base fire. So let's go into effect. We'll go down here to distort, and we'll add a displacement map. So distort, and then displacement map. You can see it comes up pretty much default, but we want to change a couple of things. So let's set our displacement map layer to base fire. We're just going to go here to luminance. So we're going to set both of these to luminance, not red and green. And we're going to set it to a higher value. So our max, you can see that the higher the value, the more it's going to distort. So if I do this, you can see it's distorting the image more. This is going to be horizontally, and this is going to be vertically. The horizontal isn't really important, but we'll just set this to 100. and then the vertical displacement we'll set to 200. Okay, once that's done, you want to go ahead and leave expand output on, and you go ahead and leave center map. So you can see now what we've done is we've kind of limited this to the bottom, and we've created this displacement to give our fire that sort of rough edge and that liquid edge. So you can play around with this. Sometimes you want a little bit less displacement. What less displacement will do is it'll keep it more contained in the bottom. Higher displacement, you'll see it'll add some of these things at the very top. So it's up to you what style you want. We'll just go ahead and set it at 200 here. Okay, so we've created this displacement map. We've created the fire here. So now what we need to do is we need to add some color. The way we're going to colorize the fire is we're going to do it directly on this base fire layer. It's being obscured by this black image here. That's no problem. What we want to do is we want a layer style. So we'll go to layer. We'll go down here to layer styles. We're going to add a gradient overlay. So you'll see by default, the gradient overlay is going to be black and white. So let's open up our gradient overlay and go to edit gradient. Now we're going to start with kind of an orange. So we're going to set it to kind of an orange. We'll set it like bright, and we'll set it right up here where it's sort of saturated up at the top. And the next thing is the dark. We're going to actually set it to a little bit of a deeper orange. So we're going to set it there. We can make it even just a little bit darker and more saturated, pull it into the reds just a little bit. The colors are up to you. You can play around with the different colors and see which one you like. Now, the gradient is stretching over the whole verticals of the frame. So what we want to do is we want to compress that gradient. We'll take the dark, so we're just going to drag it down to the light, and you can see it adds that gradient in there. We don't want our gradient to be full colored over the top, so we're going to actually change the mode. The blend mode right now is set to normal. We're going to go down here and we're going to set this to linear light. You can see that it adds some of those yellows and reds into it, and that's coming from the light and the dark of the fire. Now this fire is good. It's a little bit puffy, so I'm going to show you how we can change the noise type to make this look a little bit better. So let's go back into our base fire layer. You can see that it is the basis of the fire that we just created. We'll go up here to our effects control, and instead of dynamic progressive, what we're going to do is set this to dynamic twist. And you can see dynamic twist adds some of those kind of soft and wavy lines in there. If we go back to the fire, you can see that it changed the style of the fire. So now we can scrub through, and you can see that those flames are looking a little bit better. But it's totally up to you what you want to do. You know, you can play around with some of these. You can make it dynamic. You can go back in here to fire. You can see the effect that has. You can even go so far as to make it like subscale, and subscale is going to be a little bit more noisy. We'll go down in here, but it's totally up to you which one you want to use. In this case, we'll just go ahead back here and we'll set this to dynamic twist. Okay, we'll open up fire again, so you can see now we've got a nice dark red fire, and this is exactly what we want. Now this is going to brighten up a little bit when we add our effects over the top, so let's just go ahead and leave it at this. If you want your fire to be constrained to the bottom of the frame a little bit, you can just extend this mask, and you can see how that mask pulls the fire down toward the bottom. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and leave it at that. We're going to create one more composition to get started, so we'll go ahead and go to our fire here, and we're going to drag this down into a new composition. Okay, and we'll just call this composition effects. So now that we've got our base fire created, we're going to add a little bit of a glow to it. This is in our final effects composition. So this is going to be kind of the master composition that we assemble everything. So let's get our fire right, and then we'll add the additional elements. With the fire composition selected, we'll go here to effect, we'll go down to stylize, and we'll add a glow. Now a glow, you'll see by default, it's very, very hard edged. So we'll change a couple of factors just to make this look a little bit better. We'll change the threshold to 65%. We're going to change the radius. We're going to make that way higher. Let's go ahead and set that to 300. And you can see it blows out and it diffuses that glow. And then we'll set the glow intensity to 1.2. And the intensity really just gives you a different look to the style. So go ahead and play with those numbers. We'll go ahead and leave all of the other undone. Now we've got our base fire. We'll just go ahead and run through it. You can see it's looking pretty good already. So let's layer in some of the additional effects. The first thing we want to do is we want to make some smoke. So we'll go back to our project. We're going to make a new composition. We'll set it to the same things that we've done before, 30 frames a second, 200 frames, and we'll call it smoke. Okay, now we're going to use the same thing that we've done in the past where we create a fractal noise. We'll go here to effect or layer, new, we'll create a solid. We'll just call this solid smoke. We'll go here to effect, we'll go to noise, and we'll add a fractal noise. So you add a fractal noise and it makes a good looking grayscale image, but we want to change this to be more cloud-like or voluminous. So these are going to be dynamic progressive. We'll go ahead and change our contrast again. We'll make this about 130. We don't want it to be as contrasting as the last one. We are going to adjust the brightness up. Let's go ahead and set the brightness to, maybe that's a little bit much. Let's set it to 5. Okay, let's open up our transform. In this, we do want to do uniform scaling. We'll set this to about 150, so our clouds are going to be a little bit larger. And then just like we did in the last one, we're going to key our evolution. So click evolution at the 0 frame. We're going to go to the end, and now we want this evolution to be a little bit slower, so we're going to set this on 4. And you can see that that makes it a little bit slower. We're going to do the same thing that we did last time by offsetting. So at 0, let's go ahead and change our offsets to 0. We'll go ahead and key the offset turbulence, and then we'll go to the end, and we're going to make this so that it doesn't rise quite as fast as the fire. So we'll just go ahead and set this to 350, and then we'll set the Y translation to be about a negative 1000. So you can see now it's moving a little bit slower as it goes. Okay, the last thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and add some color to this. So we don't want it to be just black and white. So let's go to Layer, New, and Solid. There's lots of different ways that you can do this, but the easiest way to do it is just make a solid. We'll just change this to be kind of like a grayish brown. And the darker it is, the more it's going to kind of multiply on. So we'll hit that over. Let's just go ahead and change the mode to hard light, and I'll give the smoke just a little bit of color to it. You can see if I turn it off, it's more bright, and here it's a little bit more desaturated. So that's exactly what we want. Now we'll go ahead and go to our effects layer, and usually any composition that's going to be sort of the top composition for me, I drag that all the way to the beginning. I know that's what it's going to be. So let's close up some of these extra compositions that we don't need, and then we'll just take smoke, and we can take this smoke, we can drag it directly into effects. Now you can see it's going to overwrite, right? So what we want to do is we want to sort of make this an additive layer that's going to fall behind the fire. So we'll just go ahead here and we'll go to add, and you can see it kind of pushes it behind the fire. You can see it also brightens the fire up. So we want to make this a little bit less opaque. So we'll go to our opacity and we'll just say 50. You can see it kind of pushes it to the back, and this desaturated just the fire just a little bit. So it's not quite as dark red as it was before. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add a layer mask to this. We don't want this smoke to be uniform over the whole frame. We want it to be kind of concentrated down here where it's just illuminated by the light of the fire. So let's go ahead and with the smoke layer selected, go to our shape layer. And again, we're going to build this outside of the frame because we're going to blur this, or going to soften the mask. We don't want the mask to bleed up to the top of the frame. So you can make this as big as you want. I'm just going to do it right up here. And by default, the mask takes away the outside of it. So we'll just change this, instead of add, we'll say subtract. You can see that it constrains it to the bottom. And then we're just going to change our mask feather, and you can change this mask feather to be whatever you want. I'm just going to go ahead and set it to be about 480. And you can see what it does is it makes the smoke look like it sits down here right on top of the fire. So let's go ahead and play through that and see how that's looking. So that's looking pretty good. I think we could actually increase the speed of the smoke. All right, so let's go back into our smoke. We'll go ahead and select our smoke down here. We'll go up to our effects, and let's just change it so those offsets are a little bit greater. So instead of 350, let's just go ahead and set this to 500. And let's set this to negative 1500. And let's see if that looks a little bit better. Let's go back to effects. We'll go ahead and play through. And yeah, that smoke is looking a little bit better there. Okay, so we've got two of the elements. We've got fire, we've got smoke. Now let's add some embers. And we're just going to do that directly in this composition. We'll go up here to layer. We'll make new, and we'll make a solid. We're just going to call this solid embers. And by default, it's going to be this dark gray. So let's go back into our layer and solid settings. Let's just make sure that it's black, because we're going to use this as a brighten overlay. And we're going to go up here to effect. We're going to go down here to simulation. We're going to go down to particle world. So by default, particle world makes some particles that just kind of stream out at the beginning. So let's go ahead and change this up. We'll go up here to our producer tab. We'll open this up. We're going to make our producer very wide. So let's take our radius X, and we're going to widen this. We'll take our radius Y, we're going to bring it up, and then we're going to move this down off of the bottom of the screen. So we'll change our position Y to a negative, and we're going to bring it down here. Let's go into physics, and we're going to change the way that these particles behave. The first thing we want to do is we want to change this to be a twirl. We're going to change our velocity to 0.3. We're going to change our gravity to negative 0.5. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now you'll see that the particles are going to kind of shoot up, which means that our gravity is a little bit hot. So let's turn that down. We'll change that gravity to negative 0.05 and see what that looks like. So you'll notice that you have to kind of scrub through to see the particles, and they're just showing up there. That's because they're dying a little bit early. So we're going to change the longevity up here to 5, and you'll see that those particles will last all the way up to the top of the screen. Let's see how they're behaving. So we can just play through, and you can see now the particles are good. Now they're still moving a little bit fast, so let's turn our gravity down even a little bit more. We'll change this to negative 0.02, and then we'll see how that's behaving. And yeah, that's looking a little bit better. Okay, we're getting a lot of particles, so let's first change the particle up here. We'll change it, instead of a line, we're going to go down here to a shaded or a faded sphere. We'll change the birth size to be 0.1, and we'll change the death size to be 0.05. This, you can see it makes the embers just a little bit smaller. Now let's change the max opacity to be about 85, and we'll change the size variation to about 20. That'll uniformly scale our embers. The last thing we want to do is we want to go up here to our birth rate. We'll set our birth rate to, let's just say 1 and see how it feels. Now let's just go ahead and play through. You can see it takes a little while for our particles to appear. They're looking okay. We're going to adjust the movement a little bit. But one of the tricks that I use is, because After Effects starts the particle generation at the beginning of your image, and in this case our solid, we're actually going to go all the way to the middle where you can see the embers in the center of the frame. And we're just going to go ahead and hit the asterisk key, and you can see it makes a little notch or a marker on our image, and we're going to drag that marker all the way to the beginning of the composition. Then we're going to extend that solid till the very end of our composition. So now you can see if I scrub back to frame 0, those embers are already appearing. Now I like this. I like the motion of the embers. I think they're rising pretty nicely. They will rise a little bit faster than the fire, so that's good. The one thing I don't like is that they're kind of moving directly and straight up, while our fire has a little bit of sideways movement to it from our base noise. So let's do that by changing the gravity vector. So if we go here to our gravity vector, you can see that we can add a gravity X, and you can change the value of the X, and you can see the actual reaction in the particles. So we want them to go to the right a little bit, so we're going to add a negative value. So we'll change this to like a negative 0.25. And now you can see that if we scrub through, that those particles are kind of drifting to the right. And you can adjust that to be whatever you want. You can say negative 0.5, and you can see now they're going to move even more to the right. And that twirl, that motion on the twirl, you can adjust that with the velocity here. You can change the velocity to be a little bit lower, to be 0.2. And now you can see you get a little bit more of that right leaning drift. So this is the final fire. You can see you've created all of these effects directly in After Effects. It's all procedural, and you can adjust any of the values to be whatever you want it to be. If you want that fire to be constrained a little bit lower to the bottom of the screen, let's go back up here into our project, and we'll just go to our fire layer. You can see you can just take that mask here, and you can just select the mask, and you can move it further down to the bottom. You can see that if we go back into our effects now, our fire is more constrained to the bottom. So that's the easy way of making some procedural fire in After Effects. Use it well and have fun.